issues, what have you, a week ago, we are finally, once again, joined by Dale Bliss. Pleased to have him back. One of the GOAT, he's on our Mount Rushmore of guests on this episode. This man bought a new microphone in order to join us tonight. Dale, sir, welcome back. How are you doing this evening?
Outstanding. How great is it to be able to talk college football in April? You know, that's the world we live in now. It's fantastic. There's always something to talk about.
Yeah, it is 365 days year round now.
Absolutely.
Clinton, sir, how are you this evening?
I'm doing pretty good, man. Again, as I prefaced last time, if for some reason I randomly take off, it's because my 2-year-old climbed out of his crib. But knock on wood, he's been doing pretty darn good for the past few days. So hopefully he stays there. And, Columbus, if we need an arc here soon to get out of all this rain that we've had. Other than that, Ryan, I am good, my dude. How are you tonight?
I'm ready for bedtime, man. I'm tired. My Garmin watch keeps yelling at me about my poor sleep score. So it's like, they told me today, you might be tired and moody. I'm like, sir, I did not need an app to tell me this. I feel it deeply right now.
What are you sipping on there?
I don't know. It's some Kentucky bourbon. My parents were in town last weekend, and on my way home from work, I stopped at Total Wine because they're alcoholics, and I needed to get wine for the weekend, and I had no hard liquor in the house, so I'm like, well, I'll grab a bottle of bourbon too in case my dad wants to sip on something overnight. And I was just staring at the bourbon aisle, and one of the workers like, smell this, and he just held like the bottle up to me. I'm like, wow, that smells really good. He's like, yeah, this is good stuff. So I'm like, all right, you talked me into it, and they proceeded to drink one of the bottles of wine and none of the bourbon. So I guess I have alcohol now. I don't really drink, but I'm like, you know what, this seems like a good occasion to break this out, and it's actually pretty good. So,
and next time we have Larry on the show, whether it be in season or not, let me know, and I'll pour up a glass of bourbon and I'll cheers Larry while we're on the show.
He listens to us for some reason, so I'm going to get a text message tomorrow asking why I called them alcoholics. So, sorry, Mom. Sorry, Dad.
Family slander.
Yeah,
on the
right. Yeah,
Inside the Pylon podcast.
absolutely right. Absolutely right. No, I mean, this is good. We're finally getting the Ducks talk in, Clinton. So this will be a good one tonight.
I'm looking forward to it. And guys, again, if you're joining us live tonight on YouTube, you can find us there on ITP CFB in the search bar. Don't forget to press like and hit subscribe so you can help us grow the show and never miss a fun moment like tonight that we're sharing with Dale. And then if you're on the socials with Instagram and Twitter/X, check us out, ITP CFB there, as I am doing my best through a busy work schedule to get us some daily posts at least going. Been a real popular series so far with Mount Rushmore. It's been a big hit with a lot of the fan bases. Dale, I am coming your Ducks way here very soon. I just haven't decided which position group I'd like to do a Mount Rushmore for. And then, guys, if you're going to follow us just audio only, you can check us out on your preferred podcast platform, whether it be Spotify, Apple, Amazon, wherever you can find a podcast, you can find us.
I'd recommend the audio only for the weeks that I'm on. So.
No, Dale. I like the outline of the goatee. It's a fantastic look.
Love it. So my oldest son asked me to keep growing my beard until Christmas so I can look like Santa Claus.
Oh boy.
I was like, I don't know if your mommy's gonna go for that one, buddy. Like,
yeah, I could get a little bristly.
Yeah, Daddy needs a kiss and a hug every once in a while. And she's not too fond of beards, so.
Yikes. So I wanted to start this talk off tonight, Dale, by asking, heading into 2025, and I don't know, maybe this is just kind of jumping the gun, getting a little bit big picture here, but what's just kind of the overall vibe of the fan base and the thought on expectations heading into 2025? Because we're talking about like this crop of coaches who are heading into their fourth year now, and for really the first 2 years of it, Dan Lanning was far and away ahead of everyone else. Like, he was looking like the home run hire of that group of the guys who started for the 2022 season. And that only increased as the season went along, right? Like, Oregon, 12-0 in the regular season. They beat Ohio State. They win the Big Ten title. Just come in and dominate the league in year one. And then they get a shot at the Buckeyes again in the playoff and more or less get run off the field. And meanwhile, on the other side of the bracket, fellow third-year head coach Marcus Freeman goes from, you know, not the greatest of all time GOAT, but the Billy GOAT, losing against Northern Illinois in week 2, to taking his squad to the national title in year 3. So now we have this situation where, you know, Oregon's been fantastic for 3 years now, but they still haven't been able to get over the hump. And now Dan Lanning is in this group of fourth-year head coaches where one of his counterparts has played for a national title. So where does the kind of thought process of the fan base sit, and what do you view as kind of expectations heading into 2025 for this team?
I think springtime is a time of optimism for just about every fan base. It's a little like baseball spring training, right? Everybody says to themselves, well, if the pitching works out, you know, and we get a couple of bats, or this young guy from AAA comes through and becomes a major leaguer, we could be good. We could contend. We could win the division. And I think everybody deserves to think like that in spring. You know, whether you're, you know, a Wisconsin fan, a Duck fan, or what have you, Michigan. You have, it's a time where you look at the possible, and you know, you believe in your guys, you believe in your coach. It's interesting about Lanning. He was hired 2 weeks after Lincoln Riley was hired at USC. And, you know, if you look at the way those two programs have gone over a period of time, so far, you know, the Ducks have gotten the better end of that deal. Although I think the Trojans will be improved this year.
You know, you're gonna ruffle some, no pun intended here. You're gonna ruffle some feathers with that comment from Trojan fans.
It was only a matter of time before I stuck my foot in my mouth. But Duck fans are an optimistic lot, right? I mean, we've never won a natty, and Washington fans, USC fans love to remind us how we haven't. But they've been competitive. They've had good teams. They've gone to good bowls. They have a winning tradition. And the folks out here totally and completely believe in Lanning. They love his energy, his commitment, his consistency, his drive. So people are very optimistic. I think everybody understands that this is a young team, and that in certain areas, particularly his secondary and at cornerback, they're going to have to learn on the fly. But, you know, looking at the schedule, everybody's pretty optimistic with a willingness to change their expectations later, which I think is the right way to be a college football fan in the spring.
Well, I guess the little question I had, what's an acceptable encore for this team from 2024 into 2025? I mean, you walk into the Big Ten, as Ryan mentioned, you win the Big Ten championship. Where's the fan base at now? Like, is this I know you said it's a young team, but is the expectation is another Big Ten championship, and then now you need a playoff win and not an early first round exit? Like, where do they find the success for a 2025 season here?
Well, we've had a lot, as a fan base, we've had a lot of experience at being disappointed. So, you know, we're willing to believe and maybe, you know, reset. It's sort of like being a Chicago Cub fan, right? Wait till next year. So I think if I pulled, you know, 20 Oregon fans at Tracktown Pizza, they'd probably say, well, 10 wins and making the playoffs and winning a first round game, that'd be a great season. Obviously, you know, you want to go as far as you can, but that's about where folks would set the expectations. FanDuel has the Ducks, Ohio State, and Penn State all at 10.5 wins, I believe. You know, with Ohio State the most likely to win the Big Ten title this year. But the conference championships even matter anymore.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Ohio State kind of disproved that a little bit. I mean, I guess in the thought, if you can get your head turned around right, get it screwed on right to be able to make that type of run. But yeah, 10-2 gets it done now. And then in a world where we're about, Ryan and I have talked about this a couple times, in a world where we're about to go to 14 to 16 teams, hell, 9-3 might get it done. Then your SEC criers like Alabama and Ole Miss can join the party, and actually have something to talk about. And you mentioned the whole method of just wait till next year. Shout out to our big listener, Adam Bedell. He does it every year with his Detroit Lions, just waiting till next year. There you go,
Ooh.
Adam. There's your shout out, buddy. I love you. Um, so
Hopefully he's not a Tiger fan too.
he is also a Tiger fan.
Oof.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's a lot of suffering for one guy.
Yeah, it was a big pleasure to watch my Guardians knock them out of the playoffs last year. Well, you talk about the youth of the team, right? And the biggest position on every single team is quarterback. And Dylan Gabriel brought a ton to the Ducks last year, a ton of experience. He ran the offense really well. I mean, right up there with what Bo Nix did. And Bo Nix got 2 years in the system, and Gabriel got 1. So now, that's a big departing player, a notable loss from this team. But step in Dante Moore. And can you kind of give us some insight on how the spring has went for Dante Moore so far, and kind of how you expect him to fit into this Oregon system?
All the talk from other players, including some of the departed veterans like Josh Connerly and Tez Johnson, Trayshawn Holden, is that Moore is the real deal. He has the arm talent and the makeup to be a really good quarterback in the Oregon system. And one thing about Will Stein's offense, it's a very quarterback-friendly system. He's an ex-backup to Teddy Bridgewater in Louisville. So he grew up, as a QB, and in his case, maybe a QB who wasn't quite as talented. So he has a real knack for, guiding quarterbacks in their decision making, giving them play designs that give them options to get the ball to those playmakers. One thing about Moore in this offense that he didn't have at UCLA as a freshman, he's got a strong offensive lines and great weapons at running back and Mekhi Hughes and receivers like Evan Stewart. So he should be effective. You always worry with a young quarterback. There's always, Kirby Smart was saying just the other day, with a young quarterback, there's always a chance that it'll cost you a game. With the interception in the red zone, sack, fumble, and with the veteran like Gabriel or Nix, you don't have as much of that danger.
Well, it's interesting Kirby says that, because I feel like Carson Beck cost him a few games last year. He was pretty veteran, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Kirby's just trying to hedge his bets here in case this Gunnar Stockton thing doesn't go.
I think so. Just kind of put that out there, so people don't get too riled and the money keeps flowing in.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean,
Yeah.
to be fair to Carson, I think his 3 best receivers got kicked off the team.
Yeah, and the guys he had dropped a lot of footballs. I don't think you can put all the offensive woes on him. And I remember in that Texas game during the regular season, my goodness, they beat him up.
Just the main focus at Georgia is now is money and a need for speed. That's about the only thing they have going on now.
Oh yeah.
Was that a joke? Were you making a pun there?
What?
I don't know, was I? Need for speed, all the speeding tickets they get.
Okay, you were making a pun there. You were making a pun there.
Yeah, okay. I always
Epic
miss
fail.
that,
Sorry.
but that totally works.
All right, Ryan, you lead the next question. I need to get my self-respect back after whiffing on that joke.
No, I think that's a nice segue into a conversation about receivers here, Dale, because this has been an undisputed strength for Oregon the last 2 years. First, God, why can't I remember? Troy Franklin 2 years ago had a good rookie year with Denver, and then Tez Johnson again last year, very good year. He's off to the NFL now. You're obviously bringing back Evan Stewart, who was fine last year. I don't know if we're going to call his season last year a success, meeting expectations, a little below expectations, but he was fine last year. Big 5-star wide receiver coming in Decorian Moore. Where do you see him slotting on the depth chart? How do you see this depth chart playing out? How do you feel about the Ducks at wide receiver overall in 2025?
Wide receiver is a question mark. I mean, there's plenty of talent, but the question is how it all fits together and who takes those roles. I mean, Evan Stewart, a 5-star prospect out of high school, great talent. And he's had some individual games that have been fabulous against the Buckeyes in the regular season game. I mean, he had a tremendous game. I think 7 receptions, about 142 yards and a touchdown. But you don't see that kind of production from him week in and week out up to this point. He's got to become way more consistent and become, ideally, that number 1 guy for the Ducks. Decorian Moore, if you watch 3 minutes of YouTube highlight film or, just catch a bit of his performance at the Polynesian Bowl where he juked 2 guys, caught the ball one-handed, and then beat them both to the end zone. This guy is a fabulous talent. He's nowhere near as big as Jeremiah Smith. I don't like comparisons because they're never perfect, but in terms of his frame and his overall skills, I'd say he's a little bit more like Ryan Williams in that he's fast and spidery and elusive. He can turn 6 into 60. He's not a big guy. He's about 5'11", 180, somewhere in that range, but tremendous body control, great hands, and super explosive, a 10-4 sprinter in high school. So I'm hugely optimistic about him. It's kind of a test for Dan Lanning and the Oregon staff as a whole. They've been a little slow to trust freshmen. There really hasn't been, in the time Lanning's been there, a freshman who's really broke out and had a big season. And Moore is the kind of talent you'd expect to do that. Now we'll see if he gets a chance.
I love the use of spidery as an adjective. I don't think I could provide you a definition, but you say it and I can visualize what exactly that means.
He's just, lithe and agile and fast and springy. I mean, this spidery just kind of sums him up.
Yeah, I'm 100% going to steal that. That's fantastic.
It's yours.
But also in the offensive skill position too, right? Oregon's been a very good running team, and I think Dante Moore is going to be able to contribute to that this year. But also coming in from the transfer portal, Mekhi Hughes, one of the best additions, regardless of position, regardless of team from the portal. 1,400 yards, 15 touchdowns for Tulane last year. What have been early returns on him in the spring? What type of season do you expect him to have?
I'm very optimistic about him, and I think the Ducks are too. He had something like in his career, he's rushed for, 2,300, 2,200 yards, something in that. No, that's not right. It's more like 2,700 yards, and he has 1,900 yards after contact, which is just phenomenal. And I'm looking up right now how many long rushing plays he had. I think it was 7. Let me look. Mekhi Hughes, yeah, he had 7 runs of 30 yards or more, and that's a little bit more explosiveness than they got from Jordan James, who's terrific runner, and I think he'll do well in the NFL. Very tough, very consistent, but maybe didn't have that top end that they're hoping to get just a little bit more of from Hughes. Definitely has the work habits and the leadership that to be a great leader, a bell cow for that running back room. They also have some talent behind him, and Whittington's recovering from an injury and look closer and closer to being the back he was as a sophomore. And there's a lot of great buzz about who we think will be the number 3 back, Dink Riggs of the
name.
Yeah. His actual name is Dewan, but Dink is such a terrific nickname that he gets called that a lot.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, but he's got a nice blend of size, power, and speed. So you expect him to maybe work in the rotation and be more of a factor. Jonathan Stewart, who is part of a podcast called Believe in Oregon with Zachary Neal, he thinks that by the end of the year, Dink Riggs will be a much bigger factor in the offense. So we'll see. I mean, Stewart definitely has credentials in that area.
And running back too is always slated as, I feel like, the easiest position to step in and make an early impact. But the way you talked about Hughes, I'm going to go back to some Oregon history here, but got me thinking a little bit about LaMichael James and just the explosiveness and the ability that he could just change a game with. And if that's something Mackay brings to this Oregon offense, and we watched Jordan James last year, Ryan and I in person against Purdue, and the way he just would bring the wood, but that explosive breakaway game changer ability, that if Hughes can bring that to an already phenomenal Oregon offense, that's a huge step for them this year.
We'll see. He's a tackle breaker. I mean, LaMichael, one of the all-time leading rushers at Oregon, he was explosive. I mean, there's that iconic play against Tennessee in 2010 where he's running to the right and Tennessee's got the play stacked up. So he completely reverses his field and goes around the left end. It gets about 11 blocks on the way to the end zone for a 78, 80-yard touchdown. Turned the game around. It was an amazing play. And, people still, rave about that. And, the video. I'll send you the video. Incredible run.
And kind of the last piece of the offense here, and this was something Oregon was so great with last year, was the offensive line. You now lose the biggest name, I think, being Josh Connerly Jr., left tackle last year. He's a potential first-round pick. Some people have him more early second. 2-year starter, allowed 1 sack, 2 quarterback hits, and only 6 hurries in 2024. Phenomenal performance. What are the Ducks kind of looking like? I was looking at the portal today. It looks like some of the guys, they lost some prospective guys that I read about last year into the portal. What are they kind of looking like up front?
4 offensive line starters gone, and you always worry about that because cohesiveness and communication are so important on the offensive line. But underappreciated because he's still early in his career, Alik Terry, the Oregon offensive line coach, Cutter Leftwich, and Dallas Warmack, who assist him, they do a tremendous job of teaching the position and getting the offensive line to fire off and work as a unit. They've had a finalist for the Joe Moore Award the last 2 seasons. They're rebuilding the offensive line around the center, Pancho Laloulu, who is just a terrific leader. And, big, strong, 6'2", 330, dependable, very mobile for a guy his size. So he's the returning veteran, has about, he started all of this year and had 1 start as a freshman. So he's at about 14 starts now. So anytime you have your center back, you got a fighting chance because he's the quarterback of the offensive line. At left tackle, they went out and got Isaiah World from Nevada, and he's a guy who had 0 sacks in 2024. And for the inside, they got Emmanuel Pregnon from USC, also a 0 sack guy. They picked up Alex Harkey, kind of a journeyman from Texas State, who you might win the right tackle job. Dave Iuli started part-time before an injury that limited him last year. He's going to be the other guard. He's a very solid lineman. So I think they'll be able to put together a really functional and consistent offensive line. May take them a couple of games to reach that level, but they're blessed that the early part of the schedule is manageable. They've got Oregon State and Northwestern and the game against FCS Montana State. But, we learned last year, those early games against Idaho and Boise State, you can't take anybody for granted, not anymore. But I'm real optimistic about the offensive line. I think they'll put it together.
Last question for me on this, Dale, and I wanted to, before Clinton asks about your article that you wrote about Bryce Betcher and Dylan Thieneman, I just wanted to ask you about Thieneman in general, because we're talking about a guy who, his first year at Purdue, he's a freshman All-American. He had a fantastic year, and then I don't know what the hell they did with him last year, but watching him play against Notre Dame he was awful, but also he would line up like 40 yards off the ball as like a single high safety and like attack the line of scrimmage as the ball was about to get snapped. And it was just the strangest thing I've ever seen. And it was like, this is a perfect encapsulation of why Purdue won one game last year. I don't know. 'Cause there was a lot of talk when he went into the portal. It's like, oh, everyone's going to go for this guy. And all the talk on the Notre Dame boards is like, we watched this guy miss 14 tackles against us. There's no way. I'm like, okay, but he's bum rushing the line of scrimmage from 40 yards away. What are you really going to do with that? Anyway, I just wanted to ask about early impressions about him, and I think that segues nicely into Clinton's question that he had for you about your article that you wrote the other day.
Both Lanning and Chris Hampton, the defensive backs coach and co-defensive coordinator, have absolutely raved about Thienemann's work habits, preparation. Bryce Betcher raved about what a professional he is and everything he does in terms of film study and in the weight room and working out. Just a total example setter. Now, I didn't watch that Notre Dame game. I do know that over 2 seasons he's made 210 tackles. And I agree with you that Purdue messed around with his role a little bit. Had a tremendous freshman season, freshman All-American, 6 interceptions, 106 tackles. But then they kind of messed with what he was doing and got him out of that free safety role, made him more of an in the box safety, and it just didn't quite work. I think the Ducks' use of him will be a lot sounder, but there's absolutely no doubt about his work habits, his leadership, and his assimilation into the Oregon culture. The rave reviews out of camp about Thienemann.
It felt like a defense where they were just like, we're going to build our defense around a free safety because he's the only one on this defense who can do anything. It was just so weird. It was the weirdest game plan that I've ever seen, because it's like, you're getting gashed for 60-yard runs. Why do you keep having the safety do this? Not that anyone else on the defense other than Will Held was good, but I digress.
Well, what a rebirth for him, though. I'm really excited to watch this college football story. Here's a guy, who worked his butt off at Purdue. Both his brothers played here. Tremendous pride in the program. His father's a Purdue graduate. He was an engineering student with a 4.0 GPA. But now he gets a chance to work in a professional atmosphere with first-class facilities, with great coaching, a defensive-minded head coach who understands how to use a great safety. It'll be fun to watch him blossom, in that environment where he's got Mateo Uiagalelei providing the pass rush and Betcher in front of him, crashing in against the run game. He doesn't have to do it all. He can play his role, be a smart, sound, solid player with great desire and look great and build his resume for the NFL and be a part of a defense that has leadership at all 3 levels. And Nick Saban often says the best teams are player-led. I think the Ducks have an opportunity to have a player-led defense. And it could be, I think, much improved over last year, even though they have less experience.
And kind of looking at that, looking up Botcher today, he's the highest graded returning linebacker in college football. This is from your article here. The tweet that you share from PFF. He's the only one with PFF grades above 80 against the pass and the rush. 83 run D grade, 84.4 coverage grade, 84.5 pass rush grade. So as we tie into that, and if you could talk a little bit about the article you wrote, how those two kind of pair is perhaps a pretty dynamic duo for the Ducks this year. Could you also explain, and I read in your article, the rover role that you're expecting maybe Oregon to use Thienemann in, and just kind of explain to the people what that means?
Well, it'll be interesting to see how they do use him. And, one of the things that Lanning and Lupoi like to do is mask their intentions. Present something that looks like one thing and turns out to be another. So I'm sure with with a player as cerebral as Thieneman, they'll play some games and they'll use him in different ways, maybe even have him blitz part of the time. But the combination of in the combination of Betcher and Thieneman, you have two overachievers. These are 3-star players, but people have a misconception about the star system. A 3-star athlete is still one of the top 1,000 or 1,200 high school football players in the country out of a 250,000 kids. By definition, he's an elite player and an elite athlete. In Betcher's case, he played center field for the Oregon baseball team for 4 years. This is the first season he's had a full offseason to completely concentrate on football. He told the media after practice today that he's up to 230 pounds. He didn't have to lose weight to play center field. He could focus on football workouts and football weight training. So he feels more ready than he ever has for the rigors of taking on Katron Allen and Nicholas Singleton and Jonah Coleman, busting up into the hole. So Betcher is in a place to really blossom as a linebacker. And, in Thieneman, I think he has his perfect foil. They're two guys, very driven, very proud, athletes who are kind of overachievers, and get the absolute max out of their talent. And I don't know about you, but those are some of my favorite players to watch. I respect the heck out of Caleb Downs, who's a tremendous player, but he's gifted. These guys maybe aren't quite as gifted, but the desire, intensity, and preparation they put into the game is just phenomenal. And I think they could be the basis of a really great defense.
And one more piece for me is we cannot forget, you already brought up his name, Mateo Uyunglele, 10.5 sacks, 12.5 tackles for loss last year. What's the expectation for this young man now moving to, I believe, his third year, junior season? And then you guys add a very well-traveled young man by the name of Bear Alexander, who Trojan fans are familiar with, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, the Georgia Bulldog fans, right?
Yes.
Are familiar with. What's kind of the expectation, what we're going to get out of Bear here? Are we going to get a grizzly bear, or are we going to get a panda bear type experience?
Clinton, that's a great question. And I think Evan Stewart and Bear Alexander are the twin enigmas on this Oregon roster. These guys have, the physical gifts to be first-round NFL players, but neither one of them has ever completely put it together. And I don't know if it's an issue with coaching or motivation or just opportunity, but the Ducks really need for either the Bear or young Amari Washington to really blossom, because the heart of their defense last season, especially their run defense, was Derek Harmon in the middle, who was a monster. Had something like 53.
Caldwell too, right?
Yeah, Caldwell also. Good point. I mean, he was, equally valuable. But, in those two guys, they had two guys who redefined the line of scrimmage, and created penetration and havoc in the middle and prevented quarterbacks from stepping up into the pocket. Well, now they need Amari Washington, Bear Alexander to fill that same role, which is going to require those two. In Washington's case, he flashed last year as a really good young player. Now he gets an opportunity to maybe be a starter. It'll be fun to see what he makes of that. I'm optimistic. In Alexander's case, I'm in a wait-and-see mode. One of Dan Lanning's favorite expressions is the proof's in the pudding. He's a Missouri boy, and that's the kind of the old-fashioned mentality, and it really is, with Bear Alexander. I respect him as an athlete, but he's got to show me. He's got to show the Oregon fans and the college football world, really how good a player he can be, and that'll be something to watch in the early going. How productive, how impactful is he in the middle for the Ducks?
Absolutely. Your general thoughts on just next step for Mateo this year?
I kind of skipped over that part.
That's
didn't
okay.
I?
That's okay.
You know, I'm a little worried, and I think Mateo is a warrior, and for a guy who's so physically gifted, you know, he's 6'5", 270, you know, quick and strong. He's also a very smart player. I don't know if you saw the Ducks play Wisconsin, but he pretty much took that game over with some really smart defensive plays. Caught a deflection at the end of the game for an interception, you know, really sealed a close win for the Ducks. On a trick play, the Badgers had the quarterback leak out of the backfield at the goal line, right? And Mateo covers him in the corner of the end zone, you know? And you could see Lanning greet him on the way off the field. That's my boy, you know? That's film study. And you have to respect a guy like that. You can rush the passer the way he does and then do all these little things to, you know, to make his team better, to be in the right place at the right time. There's always a danger with a guy like this who is so gifted and has, frankly, first round ability. What does he do in that third year? You know, I can think back to a couple of really notable Oregon stars who maybe coast a little bit as third-year juniors bound for the NFL. Maybe not quite as productive, or, you know, making a few business decisions. I don't see Mateo Young Concrete as that kind of athlete, but there's always that danger, you know. On one hand, yeah, he wants to win. He has pride. He's a tremendous competitor who works really hard on technique with his uncle in a Southern California defensive private school called The Front. So, you know, he's a student of the game and of defensive line play. I think he'll continue to perform at a high level and challenge the Oregon single season record for sacks, which I believe is 13, but that's off the top of my head.
Nice. Well, knowing how you pull data off the top of your head, Dale, when you got Ryan on our one episode that we were talking about transfer players, I bet your data is pretty damn accurate.
Yeah, sometimes. You know, I'm not getting any younger, so, you know, the brain isn't as spongy as it used to be.
Well, Dale, sir, as always, it's been a pleasure having you here. I'm glad we got to do this. I was legitimately worried 2 weeks ago that this wasn't going to happen, but we're glad to have you back. The discussion, as always, was enlightening, and we learned a lot.
Hey, I appreciate it so much, and now we got the tech, you know. We can just fire this thing up anytime we want to. And I appreciate you guys a lot, and enjoy the spring.
Absolutely. Our fans love you, Dale. I told Ryan the other day, damn it, at some point when we get out to Eugene, I want to meet you, and I want to buy you a beer and a pizza. Just for
Tracktown Pizza.
Yeah, all the goodwill and all the extra effort that you put in to just come on our show and chat with us. That means a lot to us, and we greatly appreciate it.
Hey, it's delightful, and thank you very much. Have a great evening, guys.
Thanks, Dale.
You too, Dale. Take care.
There it is.
The man, the myth, the legend, Dale Bliss.
Love Dale, man. He's a phenomenal person. And just at the drop of a hat, guys, this guy will change his plans to come on and chat with us. And being a podcast of just two physical therapists who put this thing together and chat, that's a pretty cool thing to do for him, I feel like.
I agree. I completely agree.
All right, Ryan, no pun intended here, but I believe we are on Wisconsin.
Yeah, that's just
Were
we're
these
going.
guys your Big Ten champs for this year?
No, buddy. They 2 years ago, man, we did our. I mean, I've probably referenced this on this show before, but when
Oh, yeah, our sheet, yeah.
Luke Fickell's first year before this was the year before we did this podcast, and we put the spreadsheet together trying to predict. I'm like, oh, they're going 11-1 and winning the West, and
Got our
they
asses chewed on
did
that.
not at all.
Oh.
I don't know. I feel like I'm an easy person to entertain because I have the attention span of like an acorn, but this is one of the more fascinating teams in all of college football to me, not just in our coverage area, but I'm truly, I just don't know like what the expectation with the fan base is for this team. I don't know what to expect from them. I'm done pretending that I have a good read on Wisconsin because I didn't think they'd be great last year, but I also did not think that the 20-plus year bowl streak was going to come to an end. And then certainly a lot of that had to do with Tyler Van Dyke going down in game 3. Not that they were exactly lighting the world on fire against G5 competition in weeks 1 and 2 with him, but losing him in that Alabama game was a blow for sure. And Braden Locke was decidedly not the guy for them, and they're once again going to the portal, coming in with Maryland transfer Billy Edwards, who had it okay year last year. I wouldn't necessarily call him a game breaker by any stretch of the imagination, but change of scenery maybe does well for him. Question mark. There's a fair amount of losses in this receiver room, but they do bring back 2 guys in Tretch Kekahuna and Vinny Anthony, who
What a name.
it's
All
very
name.
good name, very good name. But 2 guys who came on pretty well last year, and I know we kind of poked fun at preseason Luke Fickell saying we have to get Will Pauling the ball less because we tried to force it to him too much last year. And I mean, they spread the ball around a little bit better last year. Not that the quarterback position was anything to write home about, but I think, I mean, the story of this team is once again, the schedule is horrendously difficult for them. We have 6 teams that are ranked in the preseason top 17 ish. I guess there's no preseason poll. I'm just looking at FBS schedules, and there's 6 teams on here that have a number next to their name, and all of them are 17 or lower. So that's a tough draw for them for sure. I don't know if it's going to, and that's part of the reason why I don't know if this is necessarily a make or break year for Luke Fickell, because you look at that schedule and it's like, you kind of got to grade it on a curve almost. But also, this is a program that, while it has a little bit of that reputation for being patient, kind of went against that by firing Paul Chris midseason a couple years ago.
How many times are you allowed to get graded on a curve, Ryan? When your test is one giant season every year. I love Luke Fickell, but even with the stoutness of a schedule, at some point, an elite or great coach finds a way to dig out some victories. When I'm reading over this Wisconsin team and looking for pieces to talk about, the first big thing on the whole is just an offensive turnaround. The dairy rate is no longer there. You've already alluded to it. It's a wide receiver frenzy, man. Like you said, Fickell in the interview, get Will Pauling the ball less. And we're like, huh? Well, they certainly did. He only had 407 yards, 3 TDs last year. They got it to him less. I don't know how that worked for him. You got experience to guys like Kekahuna and Anthony that you mentioned. And then kind of the defensive line that needs an absolute reload that we can get to shortly. Let's just spin the offense a little more. Bringing in Jeff Grimes. He's supposed to get us away from the dairy raid, more back to, as we mentioned with Dale, a violent approach, more typical Wisconsin football. Not necessarily the Ron Dane days of where we're just going to ground and pound you into the ground the whole time. But, I mean, if you look, and we talked about this in our kind of our coaching carousel coordinator hire thing, Grimes' offenses do pretty well. He's coming in from Kansas last year. They ranked 12th in the nation, 212 rushing yards a game. They averaged 5.5 yards a carry, which is better than what Wisconsin averaged last year. I know we had a few times where we talked about it was more against Western Michigan and some lesser teams that they would pop off. But the Kansas offense was also super explosive through the air, which is what fits. I feel like Billy Edwards pretty good coming off a Maryland season in which he threw for almost 3,000 yards and had 15 TDs. They ranked 7th in the NCAA, this being Kansas's offense, at 14.2 yards per completion. And they averaged 29.7 points per game. Ryan, I don't know what Wisconsin's point per average a game last year was, but I wouldn't believe that it's 29.7. And their entire offense was 420 yards a game. So you come in, you pair Edwards. This offensive scheme is supposed to be more helpful to a quarterback versus just putting it all on him. Edwards is coming from a team in Maryland, and we've already kind of went over them with the Penn State thing on Monday. They had no run game last year. It was horrible. So he's at least going to be paired with a team that can run the ball. But can you just have better luck? TVD lost for the season against Bama last year. Tanner Mordecai dealt with injuries in 2023. Can Wisconsin just keep the quarterback they bring in the portal healthy for an entire season to be able to help this offense? I think you hit it mostly on the head, though. I'll go back to what I said. The curve of a test. It's just the schedule. And when you mentioned kind of where the fan base is at, how you're feeling, I guess as just a Midwest lifer and Big Ten football watcher forever, like, can you just don't even think about win-loss, but just get back towards something that resembles Wisconsin football on the field. Now, again, 3 wins would not be acceptable, but can you look more like Wisconsin football that they grew up knowing and loving with an acceptable pass game and get yourself to bowl eligibility? I feel like that's where you got to be right now.
I think the concern I have offensively with Jeff Grimes is it took Kansas a minute to kind of get oriented last year. Looking at how their schedule parsed out, it was certainly not as difficult in the first half as it was the second. Maybe that's not entirely true. You go 1-5 your first 6 games. Your only win came against Lindenwood. You scored 17 points against Illinois, 20 against UNLV, 28 against West Virginia, 27 against TCU, and 31 against Arizona State. I know Arizona State went to the playoff and UNLV was kind of knocking on the. I guess that was kind of a tough first half of the schedule now that I'm actually saying it out loud.
I would say it wasn't perceived as tough when the season started.
No, for sure. But then you look at the second half of the schedule, right? You had a pretty bad Houston team in there, but you put 42 on them. You lost a close game at Kansas State, still a good team. You put 27 on them. You scored 45 against Iowa State, who played in the Big 12 title game. You only get 17 against BYU, but you win at BYU. That's a tough place to play. You get 37 against Colorado, who was pretty good by this point in the season. And then, you finish the season with a lopsided loss against Baylor, but they came on in the second half of the year. The concern I have is if you look at Wisconsin's schedule, you start the year against Miami of Ohio. I'm going out of my way to say Miami of Ohio. Send me your stupid letter saying how you're Miami University. I don't care. I'll give you my home address if you. I actually won't do that. Miami of Ohio and Middle Tennessee. Those should both be wins. If those are both not wins, then I think Luke Fickell's in trouble. After that, you're at Alabama. That's a loss. I'm going to write that off as a loss right now. And then you're playing Maryland. You're hosting Maryland. If they can go 3-1 in those games, I think there's a chance they could get to bowl eligibility. The issue is, after the bye week, your next 4 weeks are at Michigan, hosting Iowa, hosting Ohio State, at Oregon. Clinton, how many of those games are they going to win?
Maybe 1.
I don't even know if it's going to be 1.
I was going to go with Iowa, but it's at Iowa, so that's tough.
No, it's at home. They get that at home.
At home? Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think you're beating Michigan, depending. Maybe.
I don't think they're beating Michigan.
You get.
I don't think you're beating Michigan.
I think your 1 win in October is Iowa, if you get one.
So then you have another bye, and then your last 4 is hosting Washington, at Indiana, hosting Illinois, at Minnesota. Again, how many of those games are they winning?
It's not as brutal as October, but it sure as hell isn't easy.
It's not great. Like, the easiest game in that is probably hosting Washington, who could probably still be pretty good next year. That's a bad last 8, and I know they kind of came into Kansas' offense got a little bit better as the season went along, but we're also talking about them having a running back in Devin Neal who was fantastic throughout the course of his career, and a dynamic quarterback in Jalen Daniels who was actually healthy. So, if Wisconsin's offense can improve throughout the course of the season and then hits their stride in November, regardless of what happens in October, then maybe you count the season as a success. Maybe you get an upset or 2 against some of those ranked teams on the schedule. But boy, oh boy, how it breaks up, not fantastic. And I think the good thing for them is they legitimately do not have back-to-back road trips on this schedule over consecutive weekends. Like, the week after you're at Oregon, you have a bye week. Then, the end of the season going at Indiana, host Illinois, at Minnesota, that's tough, but at least it's a little bit shorter trips comparatively. Yeah, you don't have like your one. I guess like Alabama's a long road trip, and then you play Maryland the week after. But like your long like cross country road trip, you have a bye after that. So at least the schedule's a little bit favorable from a travel perspective, but from a team talent perspective, that's tough, man.
You would know better than I. There's a time difference from us to Wisconsin, right? Are they
I
an hour
th- I
behind?
think they're an hour behind.
Okay, so I mean, that's not a huge change. And then the other thing, just to parse out a little more on the offense, you mentioned the guys that are gone, but you're bringing in Jaden Ballard from Ohio State to catch passes. Can he be a Ty Felton-esque? I'm not saying the talent level or a la Jamison Williams when he went to Bama, and bring that explosive verticality ability as Ryan's pouring another glass of bourbon. Dude is going to put himself to
No,
sleep
it's I
tonight.
got LaCroix now.
Oh, he's got LaCroix. Okay. Can Jaden Ballard finally get his shot? He's waited in the wings at Ohio State. But then you also bring in a talent from Idaho, Mark Hamper, 996 yards last year. Problem is, you're making a huge step up in play. Cornerbacks in the Big Ten and Alabama are not going to be what you played at Idaho. And we just talked about this with Penn State, right? With the Cephas deal is, can that G5 guy make the step up to the next level like a Tez Johnson did? Those could be a 1 in every 10 type deal. Also got freshman 4-star Eugene Hilton if he can make some type of push to get some play there. But you got to have offensive improvement. And then to deal with a schedule, right, to even keep yourself in a game, you need defensive improvement. And that's where I brought up the defensive line reload. They lost a ton. They lost starters in James Thompson Jr., Kurt Neal, and Elijah Harris. But not only did they lose that, they lost Hunter Wooler at safety. And that was their leader of their defense, a guy who's getting a lot more now that people are watching film, a ton of draft love and how important he was to Wisconsin. But they made a ton, and I'm talking like ton of additions on that D line. They brought in LSU's Javier Suggs, Tulane's Parker Peterson, Louisville's Mason Rager, Western Michigan's Corey Walker, Grambling's Michael Garner, and UT Martin's Charles Perkins. So there's a ton of reload in there. But how do those guys gel in a Luke Fickell? He doesn't call the defensive plays, I don't think, anymore, but it's still kind of his game idea plan would be my thought. How do those guys fit in? Can you make enough stops on your defense to let that offense be able to do something when you face Bama, Oregon, Ohio State type offenses? That's going to be a huge challenge, man.
So I'm going down a rabbit hole right here.
Uh-oh.
So you mentioned the Jaden Ballard transferred in, and he's kind of waiting his turn. I'm like, okay, but was he like really that highly thought of coming out of high school?
Is he a flow 4?
No, Clinton.
3?
So this doesn't hold up as well because I just pulled up the composite, but from just 24/7's like individual rankings in the 2021 wide receiver class, Ohio State signed. God, go back over. Hold on. 1, 2, 3 players and 3 wide receivers who ranked in the top 15. Again, this is just 24/7's rankings. Or excuse me, 3 players in the top 21. Can you name who they were and where they were ranked?
I'm sorry, run that again with me.
So Ohio State signed 3 wide receivers in the 2021. Well, they might have signed more, but at least in the top 21. And this is not the composite. This is just 24/7's rankings. They signed 3 wide receivers who ranked in the top 21 of Ohio State's rankings, or of the 24/7 rankings among wide receivers. Can you name who they were and can you tell me where they ranked? Approximately.
One was JSN, right?
No.
2021 wasn't Jackson Smith and Jigba? Gee Scott?
No.
Oh, boy.
Well, it might have been, but they were not in the top 21. No, I think that was the year before, bud.
Year before, 2020?
Yeah.
Oh, shit, Ryan, I don't know. I think you're going to stump me.
So one was Igbuka.
There it is, yeah.
He was the number 1 receiver per 24/7.
Yeah.
Jaden Ballard, per 24/7, he was the number 4 receiver in the country. And Marvin Harrison Jr. was ranked as the number 21 wide receiver in the country.
What was Ballard?
4.
So
he ranks 17 spots higher.
Wow.
In 24/7's rankings than Marvin Harrison Jr.
I have been firm on saying that the Kyle McCord, sorry, Jacob, here we are again. The Kyle McCord and Marv out of high school should have been swapped. I think Marvin Harrison just made Kyle McCord a 5-star versus what should have been reverse.
So if we're looking at the 24/7 composite, Marvin Harrison was the 14th ranked wide receiver, 97th player in the country. Jaden Ballard was 15th ranked wide receiver, 99th player in the country. So they were almost exactly evenly ranked coming out of high school, which is crazy.
I'm looking at what Marv did and what Jaden hasn't done.
Well, right, because you said you made like the comparison to Jamison Williams. I'm like, was he even remotely ranked as highly as a prospect as Jamison Williams? And as it turns out, he was pretty highly touted. I mean, that doesn't mean anything, right? Like, you look at some of these other receivers in the top 10 here. I mean, we have Ja'Cory Brooks was number 2. He actually had a pretty good year for Louisville this last year. Mario Williams, G. Hall, JoJo Earl, Dante Thornton. Here's Xavier Worthy. That's a good one. Deion Smith, Christian Leary, Chris Hilton, Bo Collins. Like, guys that you have not heard of because they never did anything in college. So, again, recruiting is not an exact science. When you are rating prospects based on their athletic potential and not on their ability to play football, you are bound to have busts.
So Ryan, let me get this right now. Let's go back to the previous class. How about Julian Fleming?
Yep.
The year before was the number 1 wide receiver prospect and did nothing. Some of it injury related, but stars don't always matter, guys, and rankings don't always matter and Dale said it best. 3-star athletes are still elite level guys. And this is no knock against Fleming. He's an elite level blocker because that's what he did in high school. It's more of on a run-based team. But how the hell did that shake out? That's the number 1 receiver, and you look what else came from that was JSN in that class and how much of a talent he was.
So in 2019, Jamison Williams was, per the composite, the 13th ranked wide receiver, 82nd player in the country. He was a 9.621, and I think Ballard was a 9.580. So they were pretty.
By me.
It was actually, yes, good. You did hit that almost on the head.
But they're also similar players. As Ballard was noted early for his vertical route ability. That was the same for Jamison Williams. The knock on both of them is also very similar to Ohio State, was route tree development. Are they more than a one-trick pony? Can they show consistency in a route tree development? It feels like Detroit uses Jamison Williams a ton of in the NFL. Hey, Jamison, just run down the field. Run really fast.
Jet sweeps.
Amon Ra and TJ Hawkinson just going to eat up the middle for us. You just run right down the field and then run some jet sweeps, as Ryan said, and occasionally throw a little pop pass that I don't get credit for in fantasy football. But
Drake London was the 38th ranked wide receiver. That was a whiff. Anyway, okay. Back to Wisconsin. That was
Wait, you mean the ranking of London was a whiff?
Yeah, he was the 38th ranked wide receiver in his class. He went like 8th overall in the draft.
Yeah. That's a huge whiff. So, yeah, stars don't always matter. Sorry, Ari Wasserman. That's an Ari Wasserman thing, right?
Okay. Wisconsin. We kind of went off topic there. Well, anyway.
My biggest last piece for my question was for you, Ryan, is if Fickell got the 1-year extension. If this year is they play 12 games.
Yep.
6-6, 5-7. Does he survive to next year? If they can't win a full game, does he survive?
See, I think I feel like we touched on this a couple weeks ago, but I think it bears repeating here. I think this is going to be a Wisconsin year where the record doesn't. It does and it doesn't. If they go like 3-9, 4-8, I think he's toast. Like, you can't take a step back, a record-wise step back like that. But I think if you're similar to last year, you're 5-7, you're going into that last weekend of the year against Minnesota. I don't know, maybe if you lose the rivalry game again to miss a bowl game, maybe that Barry Alvarez's patience runs out and he's like, screw it, we're done. But with how difficult that schedule is and kind of the turnover on the roster, the turnover on the staff, I think it's one of those things that if your record is similar, but you're trending up towards the end of the season where maybe, you go 3-1 to start the year, but you lose to Bama, and then you lose to Michigan. Maybe you're competitive against Iowa. Let's say you get a win against Iowa, and you're competitive-ish against Ohio State and Oregon, but lose those games. So you're 4-4 going into the second bye, and then I don't know, you beat Washington, but you lose close games to Indiana, Illinois, and Minnesota, or something like that. I don't know. I think it's one of those things that this is going to have to be judged more on how the team progresses as the season goes along, just because of how difficult that schedule is. I mean, if they go 5-7 or 4-8 and they look like ass towards the end of the season, then maybe it's just like hey, this was a failed experiment. We need to go in a completely different direction. But I don't know that this is a situation that can be judged solely on record. I think there has to be some contextual factors at play in making that determination.
And then it gets me down this another rabbit hole that you mentioned. Like, what happens to Fickell if he is Cam? Like, where does he go? You get a G5 head coaching job, or you just go back to being a defensive coordinator? I don't know. I think you're right. I think there's patience. It's such a stout schedule. The turnover, you give him another year. As long as you're at or near what you were last year, you're obviously thrilled if you go 8-4, 9-3 in some manner with this type of schedule.
Oh God, yeah. If
You're feeling damn.
this is one of those schedules that if they go 9-3, like,
could you make the playoff?
no, I don't think they make the
year?
playoff, but I think it would be one of those situations where, like, let's say they lose a close one to Alabama, they lose a close one to Michigan, a close one to Ohio State, and then they end the year with 5 straight wins, beating Oregon, Washington, Indiana, Illinois, and Minnesota. That's going to be a situation where there'd be some people being like, why are we not talking about Washington? Wisconsin as a dark horse playoff team. I don't know if it would happen, but
over what's probably going to be a pretty talented and good Minnesota team. I'm looking forward to when we finally get to dive into them and talk a little more about Drake Lindsay, and then, of course, Taylor's coming back, and a ton of talent there. Damn, it seems so far away, but that's going to be such an exciting game at the end of Wisconsin. It could have a ton of meaning, but both teams being on the opposite end of it, right? Like,
yeah.
A game that may define Fickell's career as far as you're done at Wisconsin, and potentially, I think I mentioned our one dark horse playoff. If Minnesota hits it right this year, they're sitting at 10-2 at the end of the year. What are we talking about? Maybe, depending on how the year shakes out. You never know. I don't know. In 2 more years, at least, they would definitely be in the conversation. I don't know about this year, but so I don't know. Wisconsin. You mentioned Penn State is one of the most interesting follows, and the last episode, and I 100% agree from the standpoint that they need to be playoff bound, and everything that expectations that this team has this year. But I'm really intrigued for Wisconsin, and just particularly following Luke Fickell and see what he can do with this team and against this schedule. And again, reiterating, can you just keep your transfer quarterback healthy? I think that would go a long way.
For sure.
Just helping this team succeed, man. A long
Yes.
way. And if
Yes.
they can get even better out of Billy Edwards Jr. after playing with a tumultuous Maryland team last year, I don't know, maybe there's a big ceiling there for him. I don't know. So, well, Ryan, if that wraps up everything for Wisconsin for you, I am all wrapped up. Guys, again, if you could please hit like and hit the subscribe button for us if you're checking us out on YouTube, just to help us grow the show. Give us a follow also on your favorite podcast platform, where we drop next morning after every episode, and for the foreseeable future will be Monday, Thursday, and we'll let you guys know when we go back to once a week, kind of post-spring previews, and if we get any bonus stuff, I think we talked about doing twice a week within there. But also find us on your social media platforms of Instagram, Twitter /X, ITP, CFB. Come out, engage with us there as I slur my speech and stumble over my words some more. We appreciate you guys tuning in with us. It was a blast to have Dale on. Great chatting with you as always, Ryan, and you can wrap us up.
Yeah, Clinton's stuttering, and he's not the one who is drinking on this podcast.
Well, I would love to tilt this, but for the potential one drop of water, I've been out of water for 30 minutes, and my tongue is getting pretty dry. My mouth, not my tongue.
Brutal. Anyway, all right, guys, thanks for joining us once again on Inside the Pylon Midwest College Football Podcast. We will see you guys next week. Everyone have a wonderful, fantastic, stupendous, spidery weekend.
See ya.
Just sub-spiders.
And